And hello to you, our dear sisters and brothers in Christ, and welcome to yet another episode of The Bright Side. My name is Nicholas Lee. Now, The Bright Side is a program where we get the chance to hear from our fellow Catholics as they share about their faith stories, their conversion stories, as they offer hope to all of us. And we might also feature speakers who may share tips and some advice on how we can live happier and maybe have a closer walk with the Lord Jesus Christ. So today in the studio, I have with me Fr David Garcia, a Dominican priest who lectures at the St. Francis Xavier Major Seminary and the Catholic Theological Institute of Singapore in moral theology, and is a well-known speaker who has addressed a spectrum of issues affecting society, ranging from family life, social justice, and bioethics. Now joining him is Gillian Yeong, who is the program executive from the Catholic Family Life. Now, Gillian, who was recently baptized as a 24-year-old linguistics and sociology graduate from the National University of Singapore. Now, as any parent about who talks about sex to their children, you ask any of them, and they will probably say that it's a challenge. And it's not a surprise that many of us leave this topic to the schools or by any other means for children to learn about sex. Surely that isn't the right way to go about it. So how do we effectively talk about sex and issues on gender identity in a world with consistently changing and shifting social norms and more? That's exactly what Father David as well as Gillian will tell us more about in this episode of The Bright Side. So let's jump straight into our discussion for today, all right? So to start off, Father, could you share with us what, in your perspective, is a parent's role in helping a child understand the topic about sex?
I don't know. I don't have children, so it is quite interesting that sometimes people ask priests about parenthood, which is, I don't think we are very much qualified, but I think everybody should have an opinion about what is right parenthood and not right parenthood. And I think the church has an opinion as well, right?
Yes.
So basically what the church says is that the family is the most important association. And why? Because the most important thing we have is our human dignity, our human value as human beings created in the image of God. So that's how Christianity has contributed to the topic of society and the family in particular. And therefore, that the family is the school of humanity, which means that it is only in the school where we learn what it means to be human.
That's right.
And that is probably the most important message we have. And there is no school, there is no university, there is no institution that is going to substitute the family for that. So although I don't have children, okay, I think that's what we should expect and equip families with. Not only expect, but also help and support families in that role. That the moment you come into the world, you don't come into the world in an institution. You come into the world to two people who love each other, and that's why you are here. And not only they love each other, they also love you, and they accept you unconditionally. So the more that message comes across, the more the child will grow up knowing the dignity and the value he has, and the less that message comes across, which also happens. No parent is perfect, and very often we compromise that message, and we tell children, or they get the message, even if we don't tell children explicitly, they get the message that you are only approved, you are only appreciated if you behave, if you have good grades, if you don't create trouble. So that is kind of the opposite of what a family should be. And I think that's pretty much how the church, I think, understands the essence of marriage, the importance of the family, and the crucial role of education. That is the most important message families have to communicate to their children and society.
Now, Father, as I mentioned earlier, a lot of parents are leaving the topic of sex, educating the children about sex to the schools. What is your opinion on that?
So the family should be the first educators for the reasons I just said. So there is no school that is going to substitute in that. So there are many dimensions about sexuality, and of course the school is supposed to educate about the biology of the aspect of sexuality according to the age of children. That's part of normal social education. But the important message is what is sex for, what is the importance of that, how do you exercise your sexuality so that it fosters your human dignity and respect for other people. And that there is no school that is going to teach that, and there is no school that has the strict obligation to teach that. So that is the responsibility of the parents. In the church, we say that the first catechists are the parents. So we could translate that into society, and we can say that the first teachers are the parents. And everybody runs away from the topic of sexuality. It is very difficult and very controversial, and everybody runs away from it. So schools say that the parents should do it, parents say that the schools should do it. I think that they should come together and make reasonable decisions about this, because once again, the fundamentals of sexuality belong to the parents. And then the other aspects, the more scientific aspects or social aspects, belongs to the school.
Okay, Father, in your own priestly ministry, and also as you have been coming into contact with students at the CTIS, Catholic Theological Institute of Singapore, have you had any discussions with parents about the topic of teaching about sex to children, and have they expressed any difficulty of sorts to you?
I don't think, I cannot remember any conversation that I have because students in Singapore tend to be very compliant. So, but obviously I am aware of the challenges that parenthood has, and this is one of them, right? Once again, the topic of sexuality, it has always been important, complicated, difficult. I think today is just incredibly difficult, complex, and a nightmare for all the new ideas that are exploding all over the place. So I don't envy any parent today, but I understand the challenges and the problems that may have, because it is, first of all, many of these problems is the first time we have them, so we have no clue of how to solve them. It's not that we have a long tradition of dealing with Facebook and Instagram, right? So I think that adds to the problem, and so obviously I know about the challenges and difficulties parents have. Yes.
Okay. Now, Gillian, let's bring you into the conversation. Okay. You did your studies in the university, and you studied sociology.
Yes.
Has there been any struggle, any dichotomy for you, as a university student as well as a Christian, especially on the topic of sex?
Right. So when I was studying sociology, I wasn't yet a Christian. So I studied a lot of postmodernist thoughts and gender ideology, that originated from people like Butler. Then there were linguistic theories that suggested there are many different kinds of genders, because there are some languages that accounted for more than two genders per se. So when I first came to the Christian faith, I remember I told my Protestant friends when I was Protestant that there are multiple genders. And then they laughed at me. So to them, growing up in the Christian faith, gender was the same as sex, right? So biologically, there are two sexes, and therefore there are two genders. But in language, it's a bit different. For example, like German has a neutral gender. But this entire idea of gender has been something that I have been trying to reconcile, especially coming into the Christian faith. Is there a dichotomy? I don't think it is not reconcilable. Though there definitely has been a lot of discussions that make it seem as though it is either one or the other. I think there's a lot of dialogue that hasn't really divulged the nuances of what these topics have to offer, right? So but at the crux of it, the church brings everything back to the church teachings bring everything back to what is reality. Like, for example, like theology of the body is something that I've been more exposed to in the past year, coming to the Catholic Church, and how St. John Paul II questions, right? Why are we born with the male and female bodies? And then using a phenomenological approach to understand that, and understanding gender identities. Yeah. So, I mean, there is definitely a struggle in trying to reconcile these ideas, but I wouldn't say that that this struggle is for naught, or that to understand what the world, like what I was taught in university, means that I necessarily have to disavow what the church teaches. Yeah.
Okay. Now, Father, I think Gillian briefly mentioned about third gender and things like that when it comes to gender identity. But we're seeing quite a lot of conversations about gender identity, transgenderism, and other challenges to the traditional understanding of what it means to be male and female. So what in your own opinion is this whole conversation about, and why do you think it's happening now?
Okay, that's a very serious question. I think it's many causes. On the one hand, a very strong desire of affirming human dignity. I think that's important. I don't think it's part of the conversation. It should be important that everybody realizes that in the past we were not all accepting this idea that we are all equal in dignity. And this idea has been moving forward with in big leaps, so to speak. So racism, feminism, and all that have put all these ideas, pushing these ideas forward, right? So I think that's the one main motivator of these new ideas, and that's good. Where it has gone very wrong is in lacking a sense of reality. So briefly, the difference between sex and gender. I'm Spanish, so we speak Spanish. Spanish is a language that has genders. So when I was growing up, there was no similarities there's no connection between sex and gender. Gender is something that happens to words. Sex is something that happens to animals. Okay, we include it. So there is no connection. So you don't see words having sex. So there is not two genders. There are many genders. In Spanish we have masculine, feminine, and very few instances of neuter. In Greek and Latin and many other languages, they will have at least 3 genders. So it is purely conventional and has nothing to do with sexuality. In different languages, in Italian, some things that are male, in Spanish are female. So it is about that, femininity and masculinity, not about male and female. So male and female are part of how many higher animals are divided, and it is clearly binary. So natural selection has made a tremendous effort to make sure that it is as binary as it can be. Perhaps we don't have any other factor in animals that tends to be as binary as sexuality. So it is quite kind of funny that these two things so language is important, I think. So in English, gender, the word gender started to substitute sex. Sex changed meaning. That now it doesn't mean the same. You have years ago in an immigration form, there was the word sex there. The answer was not yes or no. The answer was male or female. So today, sex is something you do, not something you are. And gender is something you choose to be. So it's extremely confusing.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yes.
So there are two new ideas that have just exploded in our culture. It is, first of all, that gender is not binary. So the first idea is that you disconnect sex from gender.
Yeah.
Okay, that's very important. That can only be possible if you understand that sex is only something biological and gender is something cultural or psychological. So the root of that idea, you have to go back to René Descartes and the dualism of the human person, and that has been very, very effective in our societies. We tend to think of ourselves as a body attached to a soul or a mind, whatever you want to put it. So without that idea, these ideas wouldn't be possible, because now you can say that sex is something of the body, and if the body is not something very important, that matter doesn't matter very much. What matters is the mind, the spirit, our choices, our freedom. Then you can divorce that, and you can say, okay, maybe you are biologically male, but that doesn't matter because it is matter. So what is important is what you believe, what you want to be. So first of all, the dissociation between body and mind, or body and soul. Second, extremely an identity of the individual with the freedom you have. So that's we have to talk about existentialism for that. That you can. It doesn't matter what you are. What matters is what you want to be. That it is a choice. Yeah. And therefore, this idea that you can identify yourself. So first of all, this dualism, this dichotomy between body and mind. Second, the idea that allows you to believe that although sex is binary, there is another thing that is gender that is may not be binary. Yeah. So the roots of this idea is in very old and bad psychology. That there was a time in the 60s and before that in which people started to realize that many things are cultural constructs, that they are not there in reality, they are only there because we created them. So there was a point in which sexual identity was part of this. So famously, John Money was New Zealand, a psychologist from New Zealand, who had this very strong idea about that sexual identity is purely cultural. That was his private belief. Okay, so he just chanced upon a very convenient experiment for him. There was a couple of twins who happened to have a problem with one surgery of one of the twins. His penis had been burnt in some phimosis operation, if I remember correctly, and the parents were totally devastated. And they didn't know what to do. So he came, they heard him talk in TV and all that, and he had this idea that gender is, the sexuality, in those days there was not, so sexuality or gender meant the same. It was purely a cultural construct. That if you raised up a boy, teaching him, telling him that he's a girl and dressing him as a girl and all that, he will be 100% feminine, okay? So that was the idea, that you can, it become, even if it is male, it can become feminine. Okay, so that's the cross between sex and gender, and it was a horrible experiment. It was from the scientific point of view, it was a total failure. He went around publishing papers saying that it works and thinking that this experiment was ideal because they were twins. So you cannot argue that that genes have anything to do. So two individuals genetically identical, one would be male, the other one would be male and masculine, and the other would be male and feminine, because you bring him up as a female. So it turned out he killed himself. So from the ethical point of view, this experiment is a classic example of horrible ethics in medicine. So it's up there with the Nuremberg trials and with the syphilis studies and all these experiments in which doctors and scientists abuse the dignity of people. So it's right up there. What is interesting that not only these experiments, so the victims even went on TV, and I think you can YouTube his. I think because this person obviously grew up. Eventually, he found out that all these experiments were being forced on him, and he spoke up and said, "It's not working. I don't feel in any way feminine at all. I have always been a struggle with this. I hated the meetings with these doctors." Eventually, he killed himself. So, as I said before, from any point of view, this experiment particularly was horrible, scientifically speaking and ethically speaking. And however, the fake conclusions that came from this study are the birth of this gender theory, that gender is entirely cultural and therefore you can choose. So the third idea is that you can choose your identity, which is crazy, because identity depends on knowledge, and not on choice. So I cannot decide what I am. I cannot decide. So if you are a bird watcher and you are watching birds with someone, so identify that bird. If it is a crane and you call it a stork, you made a mistake, because the identity of your identification doesn't match the identity of the parent. So that's how it's supposed to work for all history. That it is a matter of knowledge, and if your identification doesn't meet the identity, you are mistaken. But all of a sudden, people have moved that to the department of will, to the department of free will, that you can choose your identity. In which world could that even be possible? I mean, that doesn't hold any common sense. Why only in sex? Can I change my age too? Can I pretend that I am younger than I am, or older than I am, or race? All those things, because age is clearly non-binary. So it would be much easier to do that regarding age or race. Race is also clearly non-binary.
Yeah.
So if I can identify myself in the realm of sexuality, which is clearly binary, then I should be able to do it in another realm much more easily. So just to try to summarize, the importance was that people should be included, and I think we need to remember that we have excluded in our societies and in our church people who didn't fit, sexually speaking, either because they experience same-sex attraction, or because they experience gender dysphoria and all this. So people with gender dysphoria, which is a real thing, there are very few. Okay, but these people should be accepted and included as they are. So in order to include these people, I think we have invented these totally unreasonable ideologies that have nothing to do with reality. So the moral of the story is we should accept these people without changing reality or without being delusional about these things. And I don't think we have that discussion.
Yeah.
People are discussing only, if you don't accept these ideologies, you are a horrible person, you're a horrible human being, you are rejecting all these people, you're a transphobe and all this. And no, maybe we can talk about this, and there is a middle term that makes sense for everyone. Yeah. And I think that's the message of the church, that the reason why we have human dignity, the funny thing about this is that idea that we all have a human dignity, that we are all equal in that dignity, comes from the church itself, from the fact that we believe that we are created in the image of God. So how all of a sudden the church seems to be excluded from this conversation when it is precisely the origin of this idea?
Nice. I like how you put it.
Yeah.
Gillian, anything to add?
Yeah, no, actually what Father mentioned about Descartes and dualism was actually what I learned in sociology in university. So it was the only idea that was proposed and the only framework that we kind of studied with. That was only after I came to the Catholic Church and attended like classes that I learned about the Aristotelian or Thomistic idea of, us as ensouled bodies or embodied souls. The unity of the body and soul, rather than a dualistic idea that our minds are controlling our bodies as vehicles. So I think one of the ways forward in conversations would be to introduce both ideas, to be able to discuss, this is the Descartes idea, which people are very familiar with, which is very represented in media. For example, like through the movie Avatar, there's a very dualistic portrayal of the body. And to say that, this is an idea that people have proposed, and then this is another idea that is very well accepted as well. And then to see which one corresponds most fittingly with reality, right? Rather than to just say your idea doesn't make sense. But to accept people as they are and to confront their ideas with alternatives and to let them be able to see for themselves, like maybe there is a better option. Yeah.
Wonderful. Okay, Father, I'm just going to pick up on the point that you made about gender being a choice, right? As a parent, if one day my son comes up to me and says, "Oh, Daddy, I identify myself as a girl," right? And how should I, or how should any parent who faces the same situation explain to their child that no, you're not. You are male, you are female. You shouldn't be identifying yourself as someone of the opposite sex.
So once again, I am not a parent, so I don't have a recipe for that. And private conversations are tricky. Many people ask, what would you say to my son? It's not my son. I have nothing to tell you. Because every personal relationship is unique, precisely because every person is unique.
Yep.
So in the church, we have this thing called fraternal correction, which is how to tell your brother or your sister that they are wrong, right? And that's an art in itself. So you cannot just go and say, hey, you are wrong. That wouldn't work. And it wouldn't work because it will backfire, because that person is going to be, first of all, who are you to tell me that I'm wrong? And second, why maybe you are wrong and I am right? So it's going to create walls. The person is going to become, or chances are the person is going to become more defensive. So rather than working, it will backfire. So you can only do fraternal correction when the relationship allows for that. And insofar as that relationship allows for that. So if I know that the person who is telling me that is my father or my mother, and they really mean it for my good, first of all, I need to understand that. Then a conversation can happen. If I am confirmed in that is what motivates them, and second, that I open myself to that correction. And then and only then, this fraternal correction is fruitful. So once again, there is no recipe. There is one no size fits all remedy for a recipe for this conversation. When parents are looking for recipes, there is no recipe, because this parent will do it this way, this other parent, because the relationships are different. So don't look for one monolithic kind of recipe for this conversation. So that's number one, right? What kind of relationship do you have? And think about relationships as pipes. So some pipes are very thin. There is only very few things you can go through. Other relationships are a bit bigger. So there is a lot that can go through. So that's the first thing. What this relationship can allow us to communicate. That would be the first one. The second one, I think, should be helpful in this conversation is that they realize what is going on. As I said before, that all these ideas that sound very fanciful and very, very new and very cool and all that, they're not that cool, they're not that new, and they're not realistic. So at least some knowledge of this. So your opinion is different, but you cannot remove the facts. You cannot remove that these ideas came in history for this particular person and this particular person. And then when you understand, you can agree or disagree. I always say the same, that I cannot disagree if I don't understand. Many people come to me and say, I don't agree with the church about whatever, right? Yeah. Contraception, these issues and all that. Oh, really? Oh, that's interesting. So how many pages have you read about what the church says about this? No, I didn't read anything. Okay. How long have you thought about this? No, I didn't think about it. If you don't understand, you cannot agree or disagree. So there are many things that Wittgenstein said that I don't understand, so I cannot disagree or disagree. I have no clue what he's talking about. So that's the first thing. You cannot disagree or agree unless you understand. So the first question is, do you understand? Do you understand what is going on? When you understand where these ideas come from, why are they there, and how likely are they to be true? Because if you don't understand, you cannot agree or disagree. Yeah. Today we agree or disagree based on fashion, just like people wear similar clothes, so there is some kind of empathy, some kind of sense of group. Same thing happens with ideas. If I have the same ideas as my friends, then we can connect, we can talk about this, but they're totally disconnected from truth. They're more connected with socializing and I don't know, social image, and all this. Yeah. So that would be the second thing. So first of all, do we have a relationship that allows us to talk about this fruitfully, not like my conversation is not going to come across as I don't want you because you experience this, or so once again what we said before, that would be a violation of the principle of the family being the first educators.
First school.
So, yeah. So that would be the first one. What kind of relationship do we have? And then when that is permissible, when you can say all these things without the child or the son or daughter feeling rejected or feeling threatened, then the next one is, okay, do you have serious information about this? And now do you know that there are other ways of thinking about all these issues? So that would be the two things I would think that are important.
Okay. Father, you mentioned about understanding the topic, the issue at hand before there's even a conversation to start. Would there be any resource or things that parents or even friends or anyone can read up to understand about this topic before they can engage in a fruitful conversation? Yes.
Yeah. Okay, I think today everything is online, so you can find almost everything. From the point of view of contribution to the church to these topics, I think this theology of the body I think has been a landmark in this sense.
Humanity.
Humane Vitae, yes, but would I go around asking children to go ahead and read Humane Vitae? I'm not sure. Okay. So theology of the body, I think, is theology of the body. I think is more palatable, is more accessible to many people, and there are many people excited about that and knowledgeable about that, and so there is a lot of content out there that has various degrees of depth and easiness of accessibility, right? So I think that's important. You go online, and if this is, I don't know, too complex for you, then you choose another one that is a bit more simple and all that.
Yeah.
But I think we have talked about theology of the body, which is important because maybe many people say, what does the church say about X, right? So the church is only an expert in serious matters, only in fundamental matters of humanity. But I think the church has made a great contribution precisely or concretely St. John Paul II with this theology of the body, because there is also kind of unfairness about that topic. Many people confuse theology of the body with any teaching of the church regarding sexuality, which is unfair to St. John Paul II. So he made one very specific contribution, which is that sex is more than biological. Sex is more than human. Sex is kind of, if divine, if we want. That if you think about the essence of God, what God is, right? He's a communion of persons. And that's the ultimate reason why we are sexual. It is not just to have children, which is a very popular impression that many people think that the church only thinks that sex is for procreation. So I think John Paul II has done a good job in correcting that myopic understanding. Of course, sex is for procreation. That's obvious, but that's not the only thing it is about. And the fact that the church stresses now the emphasis in sex as a possibility of communion is very important. And precisely this gender theory erodes that kind of understanding. That creation is very creative. There are many ways of animals and plants and organisms to reproduce with one another. Sexuality is only one of them. Asexual reproduction is very effective. So God could have very well created us asexual, and we would still reproduce like rabbits, right? So it's not necessary for reproduction. So that answer, even from the biological point of view, is not satisfactory, right?
Yeah.
So the second one is not only we are sexual, we are male and female.
Yeah.
Because we could be hermaphrodites, which are sexual beings. And once again, it's very effective. If you think about life, maybe life would be easier if we can reproduce whenever we want. So how many children do I want? I want 2.5. Okay, I want 2. And they're going to be spaced in 5 years and 6 months. And you don't have to check with anyone. You don't have to go around looking for boyfriend or girlfriend and someone who matches you, which is so tiring and energy consuming. So from the biological point of view, if humans were hermaphrodites, that would be awesome, right? But so why? So I think John Paul II asked the question very well. So why God, of all the possibilities he had, he chose us male and female? And it's so that you need one another. And when you satisfy that need, you experience a kind of happiness that only mirrors the happiness of God. So I think that's the gist of theology of the body, that God is eternal happiness because of his communion of persons. And he wants his creature to experience that. And this is where the phenomenology the phenomenology comes in.
Yeah.
It's about the experience. So the tapping on the experience. How does it feel to be in love? How does it feel to be accepted unconditionally? How does it feel to be taken and being respected? And so that's and then it feels like being like God, because that is what God is. And we, of all the creatures out there, we have been the one chosen to experience this divine experience. And it is stamped, that divine experience is stamped in our sexuality, not in our physiology or in our intellectual capacities. So that's I think a great contribution to the understanding of sexuality. And once again, if the moment you say that there are many genders, this understanding goes down the drain. So I think if you are talking about resources, I think the more this message of St. John Paul II comes across, I think it would be a very effective medicine against these new ideas that, first of all, are not very realistic, and they are not very good, and they are not going to lead our culture and our civilization to any good place.
Yeah.
Wonderful. Gillian?
Actually, no, Father was just talking about being accepted. And I mean, backtracking a bit to what we were talking about with regards to fraternal correction, I just realized that there's this misunderstanding that people have that to accept another person is to accept their ideas, which is not true. It's not true, you know. When people have bad ideas, right? To love them is to, you know, will the good of this person. And so if they're holding on to bad ideas and making bad choices, then in love, I should be telling this person, this is bad, you know, like this is a bad idea to hold on to. This is a bad way to live your life. But in a way that this person knows that I accept this person for who they are, regardless of their opinions or thoughts. Yeah. So I just want to point it out because I think in a lot of conversations that I have, sometimes people get very defensive when you hold opposing views, right? Yeah. I had a friend who's, she's non-Christian, so she kind of watched me convert over the years. And then I remember there was one time we met for dinner after a long time. She knows that I'm Catholic now. Then she just went, so are you very conservative now? And then I didn't know what that was supposed to mean. But I think that for her, it was like, do you have different opinions or different ideas of what is right and wrong from me? And are we still friends? Yeah. But our friendship transcends our ideas, right?
So are you still friends?
Yeah, we are still friends. We're definitely still friends.
Thank God for that.
But that's a very good point, because today there are two things that if you don't accept my ideas and my choices, you don't accept me. So we identify ourselves with our opinions and with our choices, which is once again wrong. I mean, which parent will accept every choice of the child and every idea of the child? Isn't that your job as a parent to say, okay, you are supposed to have good ideas and you are supposed to make good choices, right? So if we truly love our friends or people in general, we should say, okay, maybe I love you, but I don't agree with you. I mean, there is no single person in the world that agrees with me in everything. I think that's the beauty of having conversations, which we are very bad at in this
day and age, right?
In this day and age. Yeah. So Thomas Aquinas famously said that if you disagree with me, I beg you, please tell me, because I learn more from people who disagree with me than from people who agree with me, which is, I mean, it's so true. Yeah. And it happens to me, and it happens because only when you realize, there are other people who see this in another way. Maybe they are right and maybe I'm wrong. That's the only way you can proceed and learn something.
That's right.
If you tell yourself your same narrative and your same stories and your same opinions, you will never learn anything.
There's no growth in that.
If there is no openness to others' opinions, there is no progress. There is no. And the same thing for choices. Maybe there are some choices that are bad, and maybe I can love you without loving your choices.
Wonderful. Thank you, Gillian, as well as Father, for that. So, Gillian, you're part of the Catholic family life, right? And this episode of The Bright Side is actually part of a series called A Closer Walk with You.
Yes.
Right? And I understand that this is actually a project by the Catholic family life to encourage families to bond together and to go on a walk together.
Yes.
So, share with us what this whole project is all about.
Yeah, so A Closer Walk with You is a virtual family walk. It's virtual, but you actually have to walk. It's virtual because there's an app that records the distance that you clock in. Okay. So what you can do is you can sign up with a team, with like your family or your parish, and then you can clock how far you can walk in the month of June. Yeah, so the event is, it starts in 1st June, ends in 30th June. What this event is for is to promote bonding with families. Yeah, it's a good opportunity to, spend a extensive amount of time talking to your families. Quality time comes with quantity time. CFL, Catholic Family Life, is a non-profit organization. So we strive to do a lot of things for free, but most of these things are not free to make. Yes. But the crux of it is really just to promote family bonding time. So this walk is actually quite a personal thing to me, because during COVID, what happened was me and my cousins and my aunts and my grandparents, we went on these long walks together. So me and 3 other cousin families, we used to go overseas together every year, and we would spend weekends together, having dinner, playing sports, and we'll celebrate birthdays with each other. But during COVID, we couldn't do any of these. But my uncle started going on these long urban walks, and then he sent us a lot of these photos of sceneries of Singapore.
That's nice.
To our family groups, and we got very FOMO in the WhatsApp group chat, so we decided to go on these walks together. Yeah, and it was in these walks that we managed to have conversations that we otherwise wouldn't be able to have. Yeah, so this our virtual family walk. Do join us. And speaking of the programs that we have, actually you were asking Father about the resources that people can tap on to learn more about sexuality. So Father David actually developed a sexuality education program. It's called Made for More. So there's a parallel track for parents and for children. The parents one is called My Child is Made for More. And then for the children, it's I Am Made for More.
Ah, okay.
Yes. So if parents are interested, they can write into us and sign up for this program. Yeah, there's a lot of knowledge and discussions that are made during this program. Yeah, it's a 4-week program. Each week, it's a 1-hour session workshop. Yeah.
Yeah, it's a good program. Honestly, it's a good program.
It is.
So the reason why it is a good program, not only because the ideas behind that challenge I think that young people need to challenge their culture.
Yeah.
So it's an opportunity for them to do that. In a world where everybody tells you that your body is not you, what if it really is part of you?
Yeah.
What if my body is me? What if I am, then it speaks for me? What if my decisions make me as well? So I think that first of all, it is a kind of counter-cultural program meant to stimulate people. And another thing that's very good about the program is that creates conversation. It's not a top-down, here is my ideas and this is what you have to learn, and then I will test you about these ideas. No, it is done with stories. So you watch a very short video, and then you talk about that. And we have the experience that young people like that because they want to talk and they want to be listened to. So it's not they are going to this program, they're going to listen to somebody telling them what they think. Is that, no, we are asking them, what do you think? Yeah. So the ideas behind that is that the best master is Jesus, right? He taught through stories. And at the end of the story, you have a question.
Yeah.
And it turns out that everybody knew the answer, knew the correct answer. So that's the genius of the teacher is to bring the truth that is in the other person, right?
Yeah.
And that is exactly how parables in the Gospels work, and that is what this program wants to do as well, to bring the truth that is in all of us and become aware of that truth. And therefore they can talk about that, and they will own those truths because it is theirs. Nobody gave them the truth. It is something that they discovered, and therefore it is theirs, and they will own it. And I think that's the best way to cooperate and to educate.
Yeah. And there's a lot of idea that sexuality is something that's very individual, but at least in the program, when I was sitting through it, I realized that a lot of it is very relational, right? How you understand yourself in relation to others, how you understand yourself as a gift to other people, that plays into how you understand sexuality as well. Yeah, but I think a lot of this conversation is left out of the conversations that we have about sexuality these days. Yeah, so...
Wonderful.
Yes.
Thank you so much. All right, and that brings us to the end of another episode of The Bright Side, and we'd like to thank Father David Garcia as well as Gillian for speaking with us today. I'm sure our listeners and our viewers would have learned quite a bit from today's episode. So our program, The Bright Side, is alternate Thursdays at 8:30 a.m. on Catholic SG Radio, with encore broadcasts at 8 p.m. the same day and 5 p.m. the next day. And as I mentioned earlier, if you'd like to listen to the program at your own desired time, you can always catch the podcast version of this episode on our Catholic SG Radio app, as well as on Spotify and Apple Podcasts. With that, my name is Nicholas, and thank you so much for catching us on The Bright Side. Jesus loves you.